I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your counsellor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Hi everyone, welcome back to VLGA Connect, and it's time for the weekly TGU. I'm joined this week by the full team, Tony Raunic from Hunt & Hunt Lawyers, Julie Reid from Julie A. Reid and Associates. Hello to you both.
Hi, Chris.
Great to have you with us. Tony, firstly, how's your week been?
Yeah, good, Chris. A shorter week. We compressed it all into the 4 days, don't we? Was it Labor Day holiday or Moomba Festival holiday? I'm not sure, but it was nice.
I think technically Labor Day. And what about you, Julie?
Oh, great. I got to speak to the Minister for Planning yesterday, which was fantastic, at an International Women's Day breakfast for the Planning Institute of Australia. So fantastic morning, and really great to speak to her about her intro into being the Minister for Planning.
Excellent. And good to hear some people doing IWD events after IWD, because there's so much happening in the lead up to that day, wasn't there? So it's becoming a bit of a 2-week festival, I feel.
I think it's actually a month, Chris. I think
it's a month, is it?
It's
right.
a month.
Okay. Well, I don't know what the holiday was in Adelaide, but I spent the long weekend in Adelaide and really enjoyed, and I did a driving trip trying to work out all the different municipalities. The Victorian ones were pretty easy because I went through Ararat and Southern Grampians and Hindmarsh, etc. West Wimmera very briefly, but a couple of South Australian ones that I learned about that I didn't know existed as well. So it's a very interesting country we live in, isn't it? And big. Very big. All right, let's get to the news of the week. And some Melbourne councils have been making news. We'll give our thoughts on these. Firstly, I do feel a bit for the folks at Yarra City Council. They've been the last cab off the rank, basically, to introduce a separate waste charge. But they seem to be copping the brunt of this whole concept of separating out waste charges, and it's attracted a lot of media attention this week. Tony, what's your take?
Yeah. I should start by saying I do act for the City of Yarra, but as you say, it's something that's quite common. In fact, it's now across the whole sector that this separation occurs. And my view is it's a positive thing that there's transparency. But let's face it, the reason why councils are doing this is so that they can, I suppose, their waste charges can better reflect the actual costs in the market and aren't constrained by the rate capping issues that councils have had. There's no doubt that the cost of providing residential and other waste collection services has just grown exponentially in recent years. And with rate capping at, I think, averaging 1.75% over the past 3 years, it's 3.5% in 23-24. The corollary of that is that the cost of your waste collection services has gone up 90%. Over those 3 years. Well, certainly the Victorian government's charges to councils, the waste levy has gone up 90%. So I have a lot of sympathy for the situation the City of Yarra and other councils find themselves in. And it's only right that councils should, make sure that they're collecting sufficient revenue to be able to continue to provide these and other services.
Yeah, so there's been quite a bit of media coverage of this, as I said, and I'm not sure it's really gotten to the heart of those sorts of issues that you've talked about, Tony. It's been more on the emotive level. Julie, you might have picked up on that, just this idea of an extra charge. But the council has, if you look at their papers, talked about the way this works, and it doesn't mean that rates are going to go up as well. There's adjustments that are made in terms of the overall income to the council, but it is about transparency.
That's right, Chris. And I mean, the council will have to very clearly spell out the cost of that service and then divide that between the users. And so there is a very transparent process they need to go through. We're talking about potentially 100 odd people that outside the council chamber. There's probably a considerable amount of people in the community that probably are saying, look, this makes sense. They've not come forward. It's interesting because I think once it's implemented, then at the end of the day, as long as the service meets the expectations of the community, then I think the community will settle down around this issue. I do feel for them, as you say, it's last cabs off the rank, yeah, but it's common practice across all local government that they work in this way, and it has proven to work effectively, and it means financially that the council can cover the costs of that service. So it makes much more sense to me to go down this particular route. And it's a hard decision for a council when you've got some very emotive people that are at the doorstep with placards and that are shouting in the chamber.
Not only that, Julie. I get the emotion part of it. They've been whipped up by certain parties. But the incivility of it, if you watch some of those clips from the meeting, the shouting, anyone that spoke in support, including some community members that spoke in the support of the need to do this for financial sustainability reasons, was shouted down, howled down. You'd never see that happen at another level of government and be tolerated.
That's right, Chris. And this becomes really difficult because the mayor has to then control that situation. And there was media around, having people come in there to make sure that people behave themselves. But it's,
you can see why.
You're right. You don't see that kind of behaviour in the Parliament. They wouldn't get away with it. They have security guards at the Parliament, but you just wouldn't see that really happening. So
No.
It's not fair on local government that we have to put up with this kind of behaviour, really.
No. So as you say, the last council to introduce the charge, the other two, for clarity, as I understand it, are Whitehorse and Hume, who've recently made the decision. So those three councils will introduce those in the next financial year, meaning all 79 councils are using what is their right to have a separate waste charge. The other thing that's been, I think, confused in the media is been described as an end run around the rate cap, but it's not an end run around a system that allows this for very good reasons, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm mindful too that the burden on councils in relation to waste collection is only growing. I mean, the state government is now introducing this 4-stream waste collection service where we have the, food and organic, or the so-called FOGO, the glass, the recycling, and what's the one?
There's four of them. There's four of them, Tony.
There's four of them. So it's one extra thing. And I'm also minded though, Chris and Julie, that there was a monitor in at Yarra only recently, and Yehudi Blash's report, second report in September of last year, was quite pointed about the need to address, the financial viability issues in the city of Yarra. I pulled it out and had a look actually in leading up to today, and some of his comments in that report were that the current CEO, Sue Wilkinson, has a clear understanding of what needs to be done to bring council's finances onto a sustainable footing. What is now required is a willingness by councillors to authorise the CEO to proceed with implementation of the required changes. And this would seem to be one of those elements of, bringing some financial sustainability to the table. And it seems that the majority of councillors, at least, are mindful of that and are supporting the CEO in addressing that issue. And that's perhaps was a bit disappointing for me to hear about the reported comments of Natalie Hutchins, one of the state ministers who's, I don't know if they're accurate, but reported comments coming through the Herald Sun that she's, publicly questioning, the council's decision, has there been adequate consultation, etc. I mean, I would have thought that this issue of addressing the sustainability of council's finances has been very much on the table in the city of Yarra for several years.
I think also, Chris, that the state government have been talking about the sustainability of councils going forward as well. And that's been very much in their sights. And so I think that to hear those kind of comments that were mentioned, I'm a bit surprised at that, because I think the state are supportive of councils looking at ways in which they can become more financially sustainable into the future. So a bit surprised about that.
So do you both think that there's an opportunity missed here for senior people at the state government level to be more supportive or positive about this issue, rather than perhaps how do I put it, just feeding into the hysteria that some of the media?
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think there's always a really easy populist point that can be made when it comes to a new charge. And, whilst we all believe in democracy in terms of electing our representatives, if every single decision of government was made on a populist basis, we'd never have any taxes, we'd never charge for any services. And we'd quickly find the whole system would collapse.
Yeah. And look, one of the key principles of the Local Government Act is in terms of financial sustainability and responsible management of finances. So it's all aligned with that as well.
Yes, so interesting corollary to this, or the Age has drawn a link between this and the demise of the Know Your Council website, Tony and Julie, this week. It's come to notice that site has been decommissioned and replaced with a set of spreadsheets that have been uploaded to the Local Government Victoria website. So the data's still there. Their point is that it's much harder to find data and make comparisons of councils, as has been possible through the Know Your Council website for about 7 years. I'm not sure how you link this to the Yarra decision on waste charges, because they're suggesting there's a transparency element here that's now gone that might have somehow helped in this case.
Yeah, look, I think that's a bit of a conspiracy in terms of suggesting there's a link. Look, I think the demise of that website's a pity. I think that's a useful tool for ratepayers across the state and people interested in local government. But I think the Yarra waste levy issue, I think that'll blow over. I think that'll be fairly quickly forgotten in terms of a significant local issue, and we'll just learn to live with that there.
And I think from what I know, Chris, is that I think that simply it is the case that the funding hasn't come forward to upgrade the website. The website is quite old, has been around for a number of years, has needed to be refreshed and updated. And the priority obviously has not been channeled in that way with the funding. So therefore, an alternative has had to be put in place. Seems pretty straightforward to me.
I noticed a spokesperson quoted in the story for the government didn't confirm whether the site was coming back. It might be that that's still under review, and more will be known at some future point. Do make the point that New South Wales, South Australia and Western Australia have similar sites, comparison websites, but that leaves a few that obviously don't. So it's a bit rich, I think, to say that Victoria's actually dropped by the wayside on a nationwide basis. Now, another council that's getting some media attention over financial issues is Merri-bek and their animal registration fines. They've revealed in a report, I think it was a mid-year financial report, $600,000 in unanticipated revenue from fines levied on people who failed to renew their animal registrations in time. An issue here?
It's interesting, Chris, because I've just received mine.
Yeah.
The city of Kingston, woohoo! Good on you guys.
And I've just received mine too in the city of Greater Geelong, I must say. Yeah.
So and there's never been a year where I haven't received my renewal of my registration of my pet. So I've never seen what is alleged here, that people had not received them. I find that a little bit hard to believe. It's like, the dog ate my homework situation. But look, it's an interesting situation. Whether there's something behind it, it's pretty hard for us to know that at this point. But there have been some some, I think, fines that have been retracted.
Well, quite a few actually. If
Yeah.
you take the figures in the Age story at face value, over 1,300 appeals, which seems a big number to me since last July, and more than half of those withdrawn. We don't have any clarity on whether they were all for the same reason or whether there's a range of reasons there. I did notice one of the theories put forward that there are a lot of first-time pet owners, that whole pandemic thing where people rushed out and got pets, and hopefully they still have them and are being very responsible and looking after them. But I don't know, what are they suggesting? They didn't realise they'd be getting a bill every year for their animal registration and therefore weren't looking for it? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I did see that one too, Chris. Also, another possibility is that I believe that, these renewal notices are sort of sent out by a third party on behalf of council, and I think they're called Easy Bill, and the allegation is that perhaps some of these emails ended up in spam boxes, and that it's possible that's the case, and that no doubt Merri-bek Council will look at its systems for communicating these renewal notices in future years, but perhaps not surprising that with, as I say, with the amount of people who bought pets over the pandemic, I guess it's possible that pets have been gifted to people and such, and they're just not knowledgeable pet owners in terms of the registration process. But as you say, most of us would expect something like that in the mail.
Chris, because Kingston have a pet expo each year to try and raise the awareness of looking after pets and what is really important, and they provide that support to the community, which I think is a great initiative. Brings people out from everywhere with their pets and gets the community together. So that one's coming up soon. If you live in the city of Kingston, then reach out and go to the Pet Expo.
Very good. I think a few other councils do that as well, and it is, as you say, a great idea. Interesting that the Moira Shire Council story has been knocked off our front page, if you like, headline, but it's still here. Since last week, the interim administrator has been confirmed, and it's John Tanner, one of the two commissioners who worked on that commission of inquiry report. So he's going to be in place for 3 months before a panel gets appointed to then subsequently lead the council through to elections in 2028. A side story coming out of this is a group of people in Yarrawonga have been emboldened by the report and the government's actions. They say it supports their argument that Yarrawonga and surrounding towns should be exited from Moira Shire, therefore it's been called, I'll wait for it, Yexit. That's right. What are our thoughts on Yexit, Tony?
Oh, look, there's no doubt that, and you'd know this well, Chris, growing up in that area, that it's parochial in some of these areas, Cobram and Yarrawonga, no doubt. But I just think these sort of knee-jerk responses that are, very localised need to be seen in a context of, councils need a certain level of rate revenue to be sustainable, and I'd be pretty concerned at the thought that of Moira losing one of their major township, and what impact that would have on sustainability.
Julie, it's rare for this to succeed, but it has happened. What do you think the likelihood of Yarrawonga getting their Yexit, or these Yarrawonga people getting their Yexit campaign up?
Look, I'd be very surprised, Chris. I mean, I know that state government are very concerned about the financial sustainability of rural councils going forward. Obviously, what they're trying to do is encourage councils to work together to share services. To split off a proportion of Moira is not going to be very sustainable, as Tony has said, and is going to only create, I think, more headaches, more cost. I don't know whether the community really understand the cost of doing something like that, and how really it's just, I don't think it's going to fly, honestly. They're saying, I think they've got 2,000 signatures at the moment. I mean, I just, even with more signatures, I can't see that that's going to happen. Look, I might eat my words, but I just don't think that it's going to be sustainable, and I don't think the government would make that decision.
With 2,000 signatures, and apparently the number is growing, is that enough, do you think, for at least the government to put in a process to review it, as they did the Sunbury out of Hume exercise, which I point out was ultimately unsuccessful?
Yeah, I think so. They could go down that route just to show that they are considering what the community have said.
And of course, when I say it has happened, we're going back to the Delatite de-amalgamation that then became Benalla and Mansfield, but we're talking quite a number of years ago now, not long after the amalgamations that happened in the early to mid 1990s. So we'll keep an eye on that one and any further developments coming out of Moira Shire. The electoral representation review process continues. Just a quick note that the first 4 preliminary reports have come out this week. They're for Bull Oak, Gannawarra, Northern Grampians and Yarrawonga. Not sure if either of you have had a chance to look at those. It seems to me that there's 2 electoral models being put forward in each of those reports by the panel, and what we have now is a public submission period with an online forum or public hearing to happen, I think around mid next month.
Yeah, I think the 5th of April, public submissions to be in there, and no doubt be a lot of interest in those regional communities with that proposal.
So if people are interested in understanding a bit more about that process, I'm doing a separate interview with Dana Fleming at the VEC about a bit of an explainer, really. What's the process all about? Why are some councils being forced to move to a different model under the Local Government Act, etc.? So look out for that coming on VLGA Connect. A bit more to get through before we wrap up. I had 2 interstate stories I just wanted to update people on and get your thoughts on, team. The Logan City Council saga, you might recall, brief recap. Sharon Kelsey, who's a former Victorian CEO, she was at Glenelg a few years back, was fired from Logan in 2018 after alleging misconduct by the mayor at the time, and there were a few councillors involved too that were ultimately charged with fraud, but those charges were dropped, and Ms. Kelsey lost her job. She went for unfair dismissal unsuccessfully, but there's been a sequel, and last week the mayor of the time, Luke Smith, pleaded guilty to misconduct in public office and receiving a secret commission. Ms. Kelsey feels vindicated, has launched a defamation action against the former mayor and an appeal of the outcome of her unfair dismissal case. So this one ain't over yet, folks.
No, I want to watch really closely, I think, Chris. Again, you know, we've seen history of CEOs being affected by unfair dismissal. We had that issue down at Warrnambool. Another case here. Interesting that we're now building up a series of cases in this situation, which, you know, again, doesn't fill people with excitement about becoming a CEO. So not a great story for the sector.
For the sector more broadly. And Tony, if you look at some of the reporting on this, Sharon, I can call her Sharon because we used to know each other. I haven't seen her for quite some years. She makes the point about the responsibilities that rest with CEOs to report things that they become aware of, and then how the system has not supported her as a whistleblower in this case. Again, as Julie says, another thing that would stop a lot of people from saying, I really want to be a council CEO.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Certainly, if there was a similar set of circumstances in Victoria, the CEO would be, you know, required to report matters to IVAC if there was a suspicion of corrupt conduct. And that's been in place in Victoria for quite a few years now, that mandatory provision. And also for some time, you know, the law in across this country has been that we encourage and support whistleblowers and just react against any measures that are seen as to punish them for calling out poor behaviour.
All right, so we'll keep an eye on that one to see what develops next. In South Australia, some more administrator news. For the first time in that state's history, the government has put in a panel of administrators at Coober Pedy. So generally they use one administrator, and Tim Jackson was there for 4 years at Coober Pedy. He left last month, said it had been a very difficult and traumatic experience for him. So a panel of 3 are going in there, and this is interesting to compare, Tony, perhaps firstly against the Moira example in Victoria. They've said that that council will go back to elected representation in 2026, but one of the reasons for having a panel is to try and get there sooner, and the minister wants to see it happen within 2 years.
Yeah, I have certainly have some sympathy for the idea, or support for the idea of having multiple administrators. I think that not only is it significant job, but there's a lot of sort of personal pressure on an individual, and sharing that load is be really meaningful. But what happens in Coober Pedy? Is it like are they under the ground? I'm just wondering.
I think some of it is
under the ground for the extra administrators.
I think some of it is, but I'm not sure where they're going to put the administrators. Have you been there, Julie?
No, I haven't.
No, me neither.
So no comment from me.
Houses under the ground because of the heat.
Yeah. I just want to make the point. I'm not suggesting that by putting in the panel that it would only be 2 years of administration, because they've already had 4. So I think the idea is to try and truncate that, because out to 2026 means it's going to be like 7 years. And of course, we've got the example of Moira being ultimately 5.5 if that 2028 date holds, which it looks like it will.
7 years be the longest that we've seen in a situation like that?
Well, I think Merri-bek was about 7, wasn't it?
7, right. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think Merri-bek was a case where there was an initial date and then it was extended. And I think it was ultimately about 7 years. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not aware of any that have gone longer than that. Okay, picks of the week. Julie, let's start with you. You've picked up a bit of a stench wafting in from where?
Yes, oui, Chris. Bonjour. Flying into Paris this morning, Chris and Tony, and the French capital's authorities are embroiled in a standoff with the government over protest on pension changes. So
yeah, they want to lift the retirement age, don't they?
They do. They want to lift it from it's 57 to 59 at the moment. They want to lift it to 62 to 64. So still way behind us here. But interestingly, that rubbish is piling up in Paris. And because all of the municipal teams at the councils have all gone on strike, and some private contractors are still working, but they're basically rubbish is building up everywhere. So there's lots of concern there from the government. They're trying to direct the councils to force people back to work to clean up the streets. It's really in a bit of a mess over there at the moment, Chris. So maybe we can put that report on as a link.
We can definitely do that. And what I thought you were going to say, which I support, maybe we can put our return visit to Paris on hold until they sort that out, because I would like to go back there one day, but
that's
I'm not
right.
going.
I mean, obviously it will affect tourism, and there'll be a very bad impression of Paris brought about by this. So this is pretty serious, and this just goes to show how the strength of these kind of strikes can impact very hard on a city like this. So interesting to see where that one goes. I think it has had a bit of air on TV as well. I think I saw something this week with some of the images which don't look good. So interesting debate over in Paris.
They have a strong tradition of getting out in the streets, civic unrest, right back to the the student protests in the late 60s in Paris, and right through to the we those images of the farmers and their tractors driving through down the Champs-Élysées a few years ago. So they don't mind getting out and protesting.
I think some years back we have had a few issues like this in Victoria, where we've had EBs that are being negotiated and council staff that have gone on strike, which has caused some issues. And normally, or very often, it's waste that tends to be affected in those strikes. So it's just something to watch out for.
Yeah.
Not ideal, but yeah, interesting to see it on this scale.
Was it Darebin that had that example you're talking about not too long ago, like only just
I think
couple of years ago?
Darebin, and I know the Greater Dandenong way back
Mm.
had an issue in that space as well.
All right. Thank you, Julie. Now, Tony, you want to pitch for a spin-off podcast. Tony Goes to the Movies.
Oh, absolutely. Someone I've been a fan of for a while, the 73-year-old actor, British actor Bill Nye.
He's terrific.
He's finally been nominated for an Oscar, first time in his career, possibly best known for me as the sort of washed-out rock star in Love Actually, the great movie comes on every Christmas that some of us are tragics about. But Bill Nye's got a new movie called Living, and he's received his first nomination for an Oscar this week.
So, Tony, what's the there is a local government connection here, isn't there?
Well, drum roll. What role does Bill Nye play in the movie? He's a council worker. So he's a widower. He leads a small office in London's Public Works Department. And I haven't seen the movie, but I won't give away the plot that I've read, but it sounds pretty exciting. Who would have thought that, whoever said that the life of a council worker wasn't, a movie star role? Really, it is.
Yeah, well, I can't think of another example. So good pickup, Tony. I, of course, loved him in The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, and its sequel or sequels, however many there were, one, I think. Which reminds me, true story, last weekend, walking down Hindley Street, which is an interesting street in Adelaide, I said to my wife, I'm almost certain that was Dev Patel that just walked past me from the aforementioned movie. I went and Googled it, and apparently he lives there. So I'm convinced it was him.
There you go.
How about that? Brush with fame. Anyway, we are digressing, folks. We apologise. And we're going to digress even more because, Julie, you want to share a music tip with us before we go.
Yeah, Chris, look, this is on the theme of Melbourne coming back to life and the excitement of the music industry coming back to Melbourne. We've seen Ed Sheeran here. We saw Harry Styles here. Not that I went to those concerts, but, it continues on and on and on. We've got excitement in the city. Get back and, connect with our marvellous city. Yeah. Billy Bragg, some of you may remember from way back, an English singer-songwriter, left-wing activist, is back in town. He's a bit of folk music, punk rock, protest songs, and it's interesting that his lyrics span both political and romantic themes, and he's been involved heavily in bringing change and influencing the younger generation in activist causes. So very interesting fellow. He's been living in Melbourne for the last month. He loves it. So you never know, we might find him moving to Melbourne. But, wouldn't you want to live in Melbourne?
Absolutely. Well, I know he's been across to Adelaide because he was on the Womadelaide Festival program last weekend as well. Gosh, it's a broad church this week on TGU, isn't it? I want to share one quick pick, and we'll put the link for this. It's a fact check that's been conducted by the Australian Associated Press on the right of local government to basically exist and enact the activities that it does. It's been in response to some claims that local government has no right to exist. Well, the answer, a spoiler, is that it does, and the fact check is very interesting to put that one to bed, hopefully, for once and for all. For the lawyer in us, Tony, in our team,
I just thought the irony in this, because the claim, we've heard this claim before, but the recent claim about, councils sort of not having a constitutional basis or not being able to levy rates and issue fines, and that it's come from a group called Know Your Rights and their Facebook page. And I just thought, ironically, I think they should be called like Know Your Rights, but we don't know the law, because the Constitution, the Australian Constitution, is very clear. It's a document that really lists powers for the Commonwealth. And then everything else that's not listed in there, things like, so things that are listed are things like defence and commerce between the states and that. And all the other things that aren't listed are the residuary powers, and they sit with the states. And of course, the state constitutions deal with local governments and govern local governments, and clearly, local governments have a legal role on the basis of that. Although it's true that we have been trying for many years to try and have local government enshrined in the Australian Constitution. I think there were attempts to do that in 74 and 88, and then a sort of a belated attempt that was withdrawn in 2013. But to me, there's no doubt about the legality of local government, and when that's ever been challenged in a court, it's never been given any credence by any judge or court in Australia that I'm aware of.
Councils often have to respond to spurious claims in letters they receive, and I think this is a good resource for some of them to refer to, perhaps when they want some of the language to respond to those. Thank you for that, Tony. How's the heart, by the way? We're doing this the morning after the opening round in the AFL.
Supporter, and I thought we had it till the last minute or two, but 2 points is better than 0 points, isn't it? And isn't it awesome? 88,000 people at the MCG in Melbourne, and probably the same or more this weekend as well, when Collingwood played Yarrawonga. It'll be another huge game. So great.
I did hear for the first time in history, the first two matches of the opening round were sellouts. Julie, do you have a team?
Richmond.
There we go. We were opposed last night.
We probably should have got that out of the way at the start of the show. All right. We're going to wrap this up. Thank you both, as always, for your insights. Great to speak with you. Look forward to having you back very soon on TGU. To you, the viewer and the listener, keep watching on YouTube. We've got some terrific episodes coming for you. In fact, this week we published an interview with David Wolfe from IBAC, the Deputy Commissioner there, about a range of things, including some initial observations from the Moira report. I recommend that one to you, and you can subscribe on your podcast player as well. My thanks to Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, Tony and the team, for being the sponsors of TGU, and we look forward to having you back for more VLGA Connect very soon. Bye for now.